Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we navigate what is happening in the world of politics. I'm Stacey Smith, and if you're watching or listening to this podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button on whatever platform you happen to be using. Most analysts say the off-year election was a blue wave, but can the Democrats keep the momentum going into the midterm elections? And are internal battles now shaping up within both parties? We'll talk about that and more in this edition of Trunk and Tales. And with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and they are the former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as a state attorney general and as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Governor Corbett teaches law at Duquesne University and also practices law in the city of Pittsburgh. Also joining me on the Democratic side is the former Pennsylvania Auditor General, Eugene D. Pasquale. He held that office for 8 years, and prior to that, he was elected to the state legislature. Also, he's got a new job. He is now the state Democratic Party chairman, and we're going to talk about that, Eugene, in just a second. But do you still teach law?
I teach at the University of Pittsburgh undergraduate and a graduate class at your college. So.
Okay, great. Next to Eugene is Keith Schmidt. He's the former state director for Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also consulted on Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign, and Keith has his own consulting firm. And we have Joe Mystic back with us. We haven't seen you in a while, Joe. Joe's background includes consulting Democrats across the state and serving in city government. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on politics and life every Sunday, or weekend, I should say, in the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Joe, thanks for joining us once again. Eugene, I want to get back to you. How is it being the state Democratic Party chairman right now?
Look, we had a good Tuesday, but this is the former college baseball player in me. You know, there is another battle right around the corner. Even if you go 4-4, you could go 0-4 the next day. So to me, we had a good night. Now it's up to the people that won to govern well. But we've got some big challenges ahead. So I am in the mindset of that one is over. As the movie Bull Durham said, when Nuke comes in after he strikes out the side for the first inning, goes to crash. Hey, why didn't you let me enjoy the moment? He goes, I did. The moment's over.
The moment's over already. Well, let's talk about what just happened, if we can. All of you have had more than a week now to decipher what happened in this last election, which is considered an off-year election. But I guess the question is this indeed, as I read everywhere, a resurgence of the blue wave that we saw before?
Maybe I'll take it to start, and then obviously everyone can chime in. I think there's a couple things that happen. First of all, I think the retention where we won the yes vote, I think that's a slightly different category because you saw a higher yes vote than you did for the other Democrats. So that meant there's a lot of Republicans that just didn't buy into let's fire these folks who were, in my view, just doing their job. But again, different people can disagree, but I think that's pretty, when you look at the vote totals, they were higher than all other Democrats. So there was more Republicans that voted for the yes. I think beyond that, I think what you clearly saw was Democrats were just more motivated to vote. There was a higher Democratic turnout than there were for Republicans, whether that is, because Republicans have the White House or Democrats are mad at Trump or some combination, which is probably true. I think the answer to what happened was Democrats were highly motivated to vote and Republicans not so much, which led to probably what was the biggest local election Democratic victory in Pennsylvania history.
But it wasn't just Pennsylvania.
Well, the part that I know that Trump had some role to play in this was that you look at California, for example, where there were actually no elections on the ballot, just redistricting, and 11 people showed up just to change the maps. That let me know that this was beyond just people. This was clearly like Trump was a role in this. He obviously gets Republicans fired up in one direction, but every action has an equal and opposite reaction. He clearly motivates a lot of Democrats to come out and fight back against him as well. The California redistricting vote, to me, is the biggest example of that.
Yeah, you can't put lipstick on a pig. It was a tough night for Republicans, and I agree with Eugene. As I look at the last 6 cycles on odd years, it was The lowest percentage of Republicans nationwide came out to vote. They were not motivated. Is there any silver lining? A few. I mean, if you're going to have a bad night, have a bad night on an odd year. Bad nights on even years hit you hard. And right now, even after a bad night, the Republicans hold control of Congress. So they've extended their stay for another year, but they're going to have to deliver. The affordability thing didn't work. It worked because it was real. I mean, it wasn't smoke and mirrors. I mean, people are worried about their son or daughter keeping their job or getting a job out of college. They're paying too much for cars. Energy hasn't come down to the extent it should. Groceries are still expensive. So in the end, tariffs are important. The war here, peace, military. But in the end, it's the money in their pocket and the squeeze in your pocket. It's the economy stupid, right? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, it's the economy stupid. And I say that because the Trump administration and Republicans have a year to turn that around. For as bad as last night was, if somehow this tariff thing works, if somehow his economic policies that are only 9.5 months old at the time of the election, when they're a year from now, if they start showing residual effect, if gas is $2.50, right? If milk and eggs are down, they're going to vote more on those issues than any other issue that is on the top burner in a year from now. It's going to be the affordability again next year, and did the Trump agenda work? And they'll forgive him for anything international, anything else going on, because everybody talks about the stock market. Stock market, it's rolling right along, but for 99% of the people, they can't touch that money. It goes up and down, but it's real money, but it's not real money. It's the money in your pocket. It's the money that, do I have less money in my pocket? Can I afford to take my wife out to dinner? Did I get a shock? Do I need shock treatment after I walked out of the grocery store and I spent 50% more than I think I spent 5 years ago? That's what they think about. And that's what hurt us on Tuesday.
Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. And if I can just throw this in here, just a couple of days before the election, the president bragged about the economy. And the thing about it is that he was saying, prices are coming down. You're not paying as much for food. And it sounded to me like Joe Biden about 2 years before at least a year before the presidential election of 2024. It was the same line, and the same line also, according to the Trump administration, is that the message just isn't getting out. It's the same line that the Biden administration used. Joe, your thoughts?
Well, this switches back and forth with the ups and downs of the economy and other social issues that we have to face. But, sometimes if you have an R or a D next to your name, that's a poison pill. And in this election, the R was the poison pill. And you have to look at two races, a set of races here in Allegheny County. For Common Pleas Court, we had 8 judges to be elected. We had 13 candidates on the ballot. 3 of them were cross-filed. All of them were Democrats. 3 had cross-filed and gotten the Republican nomination as well. Now, when we started out in this business, all of us, the goal was to cross-file, get both nominations, and be guaranteed a judgeship. You would lead the pack. This year, those 3 people who had the R, together with a D next to their name, came in 6th, 7th, and 8th. They were at the bottom of the pack of winners. And that just shows you that there's something else going on here. And one other race, Mike Imbrescia, who is a moderate Republican running for a county council at-large seat, had done a great job. I think by all accounts, should have won. But got beat by a third-party candidate who was, again, a Democrat who simply switched to a third-party denominator. So that R was it was bad news. People saw it, they voted against it.
Joe, I want to point on the Common Pleas thing real quick before we hear from the governor. There was a high-ranking Democratic elected official who called his mother about that Common Pleas election, saying, "Hey, you voted for my friend Dan Miller, didn't you? Dan is a friend of mine. He's a state rep, but he was crossed out." And the mother of this high-ranking Democratic official said, no way. I saw him listed as a Democrat and a Republican. They're trying to trick me. I'm not falling for any more of Trump's tricks.
How about that? Yeah.
That was the mother of a high-ranking Democrat official who literally didn't vote for a Democratic state house member running for judge because he was listed as a Republican and a Democrat.
Yeah, no, the D has been the poison pill in past elections. It's just that it's the R's turn.
Well, you answered a question I had that I didn't even know how to answer it, and now that I didn't notice that on the Common Pleas Court. I should have noticed that, Joe. But a microcosm of that is in my hometown of Robinson, my brother-in-law is a commissioner, and there were 3 commissioners running, and him and his colleague were both on both ballots, and the third guy only won the Democrat. And he outdistanced them by 100 and some votes. And I said, I'm saying, Jimmy, I don't know how to explain that. I mean, that doesn't happen.
We know upside down, right?
Right. It's upside down. I'm not sure what happened. I couldn't explain it like you just did. But now that I'm going to look at other races. That's amazing. I've never seen that on Common Pleas Court.
Never seen it.
That's really wild.
I thought I was reading the numbers wrong on the election.
Interesting. Well, now I'll explain it to him.
Governor.
I think we're missing something also, though. This is one of, if not the first, probably the second municipal election that we don't have pull the lever.
Yeah.
And that changes a lot of the dynamics of what the vote would look like. And so the people are going in and they have to, well, now they have to fill in the circle, right? So they're looking at this more closely. They're angry. They're angry at politics as a whole, but they're particularly angry at the president, so they go in with that. They don't, and I'd love to see what the numbers were, and there's no way of breaking it down, how many independents actually voted in the election, because the independents didn't get to select the candidates back in the primary. So now they have their opportunity to vote. I suspect that they're angry at what's going on. And how do you take it out? You take it out on the party in control of the White House, and particularly with somebody who has the personality that alienates a lot of people coming out of the White House in President Trump. It has affected down ballots. I know counties that have gone Democrat that are Republican counties. Their DA has always been a Republican as far as I've known, and now they got a Democrat DA. It has a long-term effect because those Democrats that got in at local office are now going to grow in that area, get some credibility that they know how to do everything. Whereas the parties used to say, well, the Democrats do this, the Republicans do this. It's a jump ball now. It will continue to be a jump ball. I think that the real issue that we need to face, a real challenge that we need to face, goes back to Washington, and I don't think you're going to see this. We need to start working together to get things done, because they're not getting anything done in Washington. This closing or the opening of the government is only till the end of January. Are we going to go through this again? Have they not learned their lessons? But, I go back, this is my instrument note. Everybody goes through this. They don't look into it. I'm worried about, I'm not worried about the country as a whole, but I'm worried about the short term.
Yeah. Well, let's go in and I'm sorry, Keith, you had one more thing you
And
wanted
one more
to say?
point to be, I was thinking about Joe's, said some nice things about Mike Ambrosia. I mean, he's a moderate. He's not a crazy guy, and I heard that from a lot of Democrats. I know a lot of Democrats that he got some decent money from Democrats when he fundraised. But I can't help but think, again, in a microcosm, Mike is the Dick Thornburgh of 1991. People sent Dick Thornburgh home over Harris Wofford and nobody because they were just sending a message. It had nothing to do with Dick Thornburgh. And this had nothing to do with Mike Ambrosia. But in the same way we didn't get the message, Republicans, in 1991, I hope they get the message sent by a guy like that losing by 25,000, not to a Democrat, to a Labor candidate. I mean, literally, if that doesn't wake you up to shake you up, you have to change course. And if you learn something, you have a chance of bouncing back. But if you don't, you're going to have the same fate after we got that Dick Thornburgh warning in 91.
Okay, but in this race, let's make the observation. He became a Labor Democrat very, very late. Or he became a Labor person very late. He's a Democrat. He pulled a lot of Democrat support. He's going to help the Democrats on council as if they really need it because.
Oh, we know that absolutely. I mean, it was a game played on the
I would
registration.
not read as much into it other than they were mad and they voted against Republicans.
That's my point.
That's right.
Yeah, and I
my
don't
point.
think
By the way,
that's,
go on, keep
the
going.
Mike
I like Mike.
Abrascio situation.
Mike is not a right-wing Republican by any
Right.
stretch. But
Right.
the average voter didn't know that.
So
had
if he
an
can't
on-
survive, it tells you they're sending a message, guys.
That's
Don't
right.
take it personal, Mike. I mean, it
And-
really
and-
wasn't
and
about
let's-
you.
Let's
You
get
know,
to the government
unfortunately.
side of this, okay? It's important, very important, to have Republican representation on county council. Keith and I dealt with this when we drew the districts, the first districts.
98.
Government suffers if there's not a minority voice, and that's one less minority voice now. I mean, it's just not. It's not good for us.
Well, you both were involved in creating the change of government in
Yeah, the
Allegheny County.
redistricting. Yeah.
Yeah.
1998.
Keith outmaneuvered us. In fact,
Did
they beat
either
us.
one of you ever anticipate that a third party would take one of the at-large
Never.
seats?
No.
Never. And there
Otherwise,
are some people that think the court ruling, and I can't speak to it, Joe might, that there could have been a flawed ruling on this. That I'm not sure that was the right ruling when they made it legal.
I looked at the statute. The statute was complied with in terms of the letter of the law, but perhaps not the spirit of the law.
Okay.
And that's what it is. And as I said, we benefit from having. I go back to the Dr. Hunt days with Stacey Forster and Dr. Hunt, the Republican county commissioner, and I remember how valuable that partnership was to moving this county forward. And and I, like probably most of us here, I long for those days.
Yeah, probably so. I want to move on a little bit here, and I do want to say that those who are listening to this podcast who are not involved in Pennsylvania at all, what we're talking about really is a microcosm of what does happen nationwide in politics, I believe. And so it does have an impact on just about everybody in the country. Now, the results we've been talking about in Pennsylvania did mirror some of the gubernatorial races, mainly New Jersey and Virginia. So we've kind of touched on this already, and Eugene, you sort of did when you said your job never ends on this. Will this blue wave or this impact of disliking Republicans at the ballot box this year carry over into the midterm elections next year?
So the short answer is we don't know. I will tell you this, that if prices stay high, and I think Keith could not have been more spot on with this, if prices stay high, it will. If prices stay at this level and people stay this frustrated, there's practically a 0% chance that the Republicans hold the U.S. House. Now, if the prices come down, I think it's more of a jump ball. But I think that if prices stay high and people are frustrated about the economy, and I think the administration, and I'm not doing this to pick, a fight with Keith. He says they got about a year. I think that the cake probably gets baked probably about middle of July. And at that point, say mid-July, beginning of August, people are going to just have an assessment of the economy going into the midterm. And if prices are still high, I think the blue wave continues.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I agree.
Well, turnout will, listen, record low turnout, as I talked about, the lowest in 6 cycles. The president and the party will have a much easier time putting Trump on the ballot next year, even though he's not on the ballot. He'll be able to make them understand, and they will spend hundreds of millions of dollars if necessary to make them understand that you're neutering the president if you give him either House or Senate. It's over. But that only sells to get the base out if what I said 10 minutes ago is working. I mean, it has to work first. I mean, if we could say, we want to keep Trump for 2 more years because look what happened with these tariffs and with this economic policy, gas comes down, groceries come down, cars are more affordable. It has to work. I'm back to it's the economy, stupid, and I think it could be on July. I think they have to have 2 or 3 months feeling like there's a real change in the air, and if it is, whether we like it or not, pundits like us fill airwaves for hundreds of years. But in the end, people vote their pocketbook. We try to say it's a million other things, but if they have confidence in the economy, if there's confidence in the economy, and a year's a based on where we are now, that's a tall order to deliver on. But again, in defense of the sitting president, the report card came 9.5 months into an administration. It's hard for any real change, especially for as dramatic as the changes have been for this president. If they're that dramatic, sometimes they take a little time to kick in. For his benefit, they better not kick in 27, because he needs them to kick in the next 12 months.
Well, I go back to what I said before, though, Keith, and that is that, this president was quoted before the election as saying prices are coming down, food prices. And that's what people see, that's what they hear, and they're going, no, they're not.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
They push that D button.
Well, you can spin a lot of
100%.
things, but you cannot spin people's daily lives. If it's more expensive, they know it. You can spin, hey, we're going to make this better car 10 years down the line, or what's happening with climate change, or, and a lot of people aren't, but you cannot spin their daily life costs. You can't spin it.
You're going to get to it, and I'm jumping in. Are you going to get to the shutdown in the next segment?
That's next on.
Because I think the shutdown has something to do with the next year's election too. And I'll just throw this into the conversation and see how you react to it. Part of the reasons why I think that when they seemed like they were in the driver's seat that it ended is there was growing understanding in the American people and the electorate that the far left was controlling the shutdown. And I think they had to say, the only thing left right now, they're going to try to play the New York situation to their advantage. If something goes awry there, which a lot of people think that it's going to be tough to govern with the communists, it might, and it might pay some residuals next year. But if you allow the party that seems to be surging in this year's election, this recent election, to be still tied to the left, it could still be problematic for them next year. And they have to push themselves more towards the middle. And the longer this was going on, the longer it seemed to be AOC's agenda than the Democratic agenda.
Joe,
well, needless to say, I have a different spin than Keith does on that. It's like a hostage, one of these hostage taker movies, Die Hard, the Bruce Willis film.
Right.
When the hostage taker threatens to harm the hostages, you can't negotiate with that guy. At some point, you just got to fold up your tent and move on. And I think that's what happened here. They thought they could outlast him, and maybe he would respond to the fact that children were going hungry, that sick people were going to suffer as their health care costs went out of reach. And this guy doesn't flinch. I mean, that doesn't move him one bit. So so I think you have to capitulate, because you can't let the hostages be harmed further, and move on. This thing, I think, was a wash. I think that the big issues are still on the table, and they'll be fought over in the upcoming election.
Governor?
I agree with what I'm hearing. I don't think we really know what happened with this, other than, I agree with Joe, they had to move on. It is a wash. But it can come right back again in January. And if it does come back in January, I don't know which side is the one who suffers. Well, frankly, I think all of Congress suffers. You have the president, his reputation takes a hit if it doesn't get done. But he's used to that. They're all for election next year. They got primaries coming up, both sides of the aisle. If they don't get this resolved to completion, I think it's going to be, you thought now was chaos, I think it's more chaotic next year.
Hey, I sat on the tarmac for a total of 6 hours on Sunday.
I told you that.
Deplaned and replaned, and then deplaned again, and they wanted us to go back on. So, that old saying, fool me once, fool me twice? They weren't going to fool me the third time. They did fool me twice. I got back on. But there were people on the plane that kept saying, thank you, Donald Trump. So, he was taking some hits over this. But I don't think he flinches. This is a guy who just goes straight ahead.
I don't think he even hears it.
Yeah, I agree.
So let me end this by asking this question then. Obviously, the American people suffered through this, but can either party claim a victory with this shutdown?
No, I look. I'm just gonna tell you, look. I know we're all supposed to, we jokingly say. I think, to me, as an American, the whole thing was embarrassing.
Yeah. And unfortunately, as you point out, we could be looking at this again in the not too distant future. So let's take a wider view then of everything we've talked about. You all have kind of touched on this. After the shutdown and the election, where do both parties stand, I'm going to say, internally? Are existing factions within each party now coming more into public view? I'm thinking more of the Democrats on this one because of the shutdown, where you had the moderates, 8 moderates who went and voted with Republicans to end the shutdown. So are we seeing a division there as far as the Democrats go? And at what point on the Republican side do people start saying, we got our heads handed to us in this off-year election. Can I side with Mr. Trump through the midterm election?
So,
Go ahead,
Governor.
Governor.
Governor, I'd love to hear that, because I think we still don't know. So,
I think politics is, as we're used to it, are in a period of drastic change coming about. And a lot of that is because we have a strong right and a strong left. I call them the tails of the wagging the dog, like from 2 different directions. We have a lot of moderate Republicans, a lot of moderate Democrats, and we have a lot. I'll pick Pennsylvania, but it's across the country. We have a lot of independents who don't participate here in Pennsylvania in selecting the candidates, but then they get a chance to vote. That number is growing in Pennsylvania. It's growing across the country. People are tired of what they're seeing coming out of Washington and coming out of the Capitol buildings in their states. I think we're in for an erosion of what we are used to. I think if I were in Washington or in Harrisburg with my party, I'd be saying, we've got to reach across the aisle within our own party. We've got to come closer together. But there's not a willingness by the extremes. And that leads me to something I was in discussions with yesterday. When we are one of only 9 states that have a closed primary system, we are eliminating potential more moderate candidates, and I think the vast majority of the country is in the middle, then we're tying our own hands and gagging ourselves. But it's very difficult to try to change. I know my friend Jay there. A year ago, he was, no, we can't open the primary. And Joe, I'll let you speak to that. I think we need to open up the primary and allow independents to come in on primary day and say, I want to vote in the Democrat or I want to vote in the Republican. The following year, they could do the same thing and go to a different party. But we're losing people who are saying, I want choice and I need choice and I'm only getting it eventually when I come to the election in November. Joe?
Yeah, I've looked at the state budget situation. For many years, we relied upon the Republican state Senate to sort of lead the way when it came to budget time. There were always a lot of pushing and shoving, but eventually the Republicans in the state Senate could get together and say, "Come on, let's go, let's move this thing." Let's get a budget approved. And that didn't happen this year for the longest time, and I don't know how it eventually was resolved, but the Republicans had problems in their own caucus. Leadership, I'm told, if it went with one side, it would lose the other side, and it went back and forth like that for a while. And that's why we were at a standstill, and that's why we waited so long to get a state budget. But, eventually, of course, things have broken in the right direction.
Well, regarding the budget, my one understanding is that the governor did not meet with the leaders for months. It's what the newspapers are reporting. He didn't meet until the last 2 weeks. I met with him on a regular basis. Now,
I'm scratching my head about the state budget. What they passed, they wiped out the reserve. They're talking about the only path now is the rainy day fund. They listen. Would it have been tough this year to do to get some things done? Yeah, obviously it's been 4.5 months, but this is the year to get it done. They're out of options now. Now you have a governor on the ballot, half the Senate, all the House on the ballot next year, and they're going to have a much tougher time next year because the reserve's gone. If it's not a tax increase, they're going to have to find their final way to regulating skill games or recreational marijuana or whatnot. There's no more places to get money. They're out of money. And they put themselves in a very difficult position in 26, which is really strange to me,
Keith,
because it's going to be a tough budget next year.
Gene, you're the Auditor General, and I just want to add this.
Yeah.
The budget of Pennsylvania, according to Center Square, which is a media outlet over in the central part of the state, since I left office in 2015, has gone up by 67% before this budget. That is 10 years. It's gone up by 67%. I don't think you can go back and find a period of 10 years that our budget went up that fast.
No.
The problem with the budget,
30 to 50 billion.
most of the budget goes to operating expenses. And when you keep raising money for those operating expenses, you almost have to continue to fund it or take the hit and say, we can't continue to fund at that rate. And I don't see a willingness within the parties, both sides of the aisle, leadership on both sides of the aisle, to bite that bullet.
So, to Governor and Keith's point, this increase has happened without new or increased revenue. So
Right.
you can be pro or con that, but let's be clear. It's happened without increased revenue, which means you're heading to a problem. And to Keith's point, usually when there is a prolonged struggle like this, it's because they're trying to wrangle over how to get the new revenue or where they're going to get an increased revenue from. They had a 4-month battle and didn't come up with an agreement on that, which leads me to, if you actually had a battle over increased revenue, I don't know how you get to an agreement when after 4.5 months, I looked and said they could have passed this in July 1st. I don't get what the
100%.
fight was. And again, I'm not here to say look, I'm glad they got it done, but when you have a prolonged fight, it's usually over something. They had a prolonged fight, and I don't know what it was over.
Good point.
When we say they, you're talking about both parties in both houses.
I'm talking about an across the board, right?
And the governor.
Yeah, I'm talking about an across the board. I am just observing this going, in 1991 when there was a prolonged budget, there was a fight over revenue. In 2010, before the governor came in, there was a prolonged budget, but there was a fight over where to get increased revenue. This was a longer stalemate, but there was no new revenue even on the table. So I'm not even sure what it was over.
I agree.
Joe, can you wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I blame Trump.
That's his default.
It's tariffs. They caused the whole thing.
That's why the Pirates didn't get more talent to go with Skeens.
All right. Well,
Well, congratulations, he got the Cy Young.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah, he
That's
got
great
the-
news.
Yeah.
Governor, I have one more question for you. How often do you have to, as governor, did you have to wear those hard hats that are behind you?
Only when they gave them to me when we did groundbreaking. So those hard hats represent development and state growth.
Oh, I thought it was when you met with the legislature.
No, I had a vest on.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me once again for Trunk and Tales. And again, if you're watching or happen to be listening to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button. Right now, thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again in about maybe 2 weeks or so for the next edition of Trunk and Tales.